We are end of page down. It's page 134 in the booklet. Describing what we're supposed to be doing in davening. We'll say the first in English was today's my father's yahrzeit. Yaakov Yehuda ben Chaim Naftali Hertz. And we are here at the end of Ois Dalet, so it's page 134. And it speaks about the Nefesh Bahamis. And Nefesh Bahamis has an advantage that it's emotional, it gets excited, and that excitement makes it more prone to good midos rather than the opposite. So we were speaking yesterday about the two kinds of love, Ava Kamayim and Ava Ka'esh. There's a love like fire and a love like water. The difference is love like fire means a love that is a very stormy love, and a love like water is a calm love. We said that on the surface it appears to be that the calm love means there's just not that much emotion and therefore it's calm. But actually there's an explanation of Chassidus, there is such a level, but there's also a level of love like water that is higher than love like fire, which means the fact that there's no storm is not because of the fact that it's less, but actually because of something that's deeper. So what we started to explain is the difference between generally seichel and midas, intellect and emotion. Intellect is calm, and emotion is excitement. Emotion is where you're moved one way or another. But intellect is, when we say that intellect is calm, the person isn't moved by intellect. That's why you can be learning Torah, thank you. You can be learning Torah about subjects, like recently we're learning in the Rambam about the subjects about, God forbid, a person put to death, a lot of halachas, what's done, how it's done. But when people are learning, they don't get all emotional about it because they're in a different place. They're thinking about it just from the halacha perspective. It's not something which is getting to their emotions. It's just in the mind. And seichel doesn't get emotional. Seichel is calm. So the reason why when something is intellectual, it's calm, because intellect is in a different place of the soul. Intellect is something which we experience in a very deep place in the soul, and therefore it's not moved by things outside of me. Emotion, we experience in a place of the soul which is more external. And because it's more external, therefore it's affected by things that are outside of me. And it moves me one way or another. So in general, seichel is something which I can understand, but it's something that I'm experiencing internally, in a very deep internal place. So one of the differences between the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Bahamis is, first of all, the godly soul is identified more with intellect. The animal soul is identified more with emotion. So when the godly soul thinks about things and experiences things mainly on an intellectual level, therefore it's something which you're experiencing deeper within yourself. And as a result of that, good morning, there isn't such a commotion. So think of the example of self-love. There's no greater love than self-love. And the proof is, because when the Torah wants to tell us to have love for another Yid, what does the Torah say? You should love the other person like you love yourself, because there's no greater love than self-love. we see that all other forms of love, a person could love someone and then something could happen and it's gone and they actually hate each other. Self-love is something which is unconditional. And the reason is because I love myself because I am me, and that's something which can never change. That's just something which is eternal, and that's something which is unconditional. So how come if love that I love myself is a much greater love than anything else, why is it that when you love to a person who you meet later in life is a very stormy love, thunder and lightning, and the love that I have for myself is calm? Isn't that proof that it's less? But we know that unfortunately people will give everything else up because of their self-love. They'll reject one thing and reject another thing, even other good things that they want because of self-love. So that's the greatest, the strongest love that there is. So why is it so calm? Person that I meet and I feel love for that person, we say that it's not unlimited. Something could happen and I'll lose it. And that love is a storm. The love for myself, which is unconditional, is something which can never be discontinued. It's always there, and yet it's very calm. So the answer to the calmness is not because of lack of quality. The calmness is because I, me, myself, and I are all one. And that's why it's a calm love. But when it's a love for someone outside of myself, that affects me on an emotional level. And the more the love, the stronger the storm, the bigger the storm. It's even more specific when you talk about the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Bahamas. The Nefesh Elokis is in essence godly. That's what it's defined. What defines the Nefesh Elokis is godly. It's chelek, a part of Hashem. So when the Nefesh Elokis gets excited about godliness, to a certain extent, it's not the same kind of excitement like Nefesh Bahamas. It's much more internal because the Nefesh Elokis and Hashem are one in essence. So it's just like I don't have that stormy love when it's love for self-love. In a certain sense, the Nefesh Elokis doesn't have that stormy love and one loves Hashem because the Nefesh Elokis and Hashem are absolutely one. The Nefesh Bahamas is not godly. So when the Nefesh Bahamas loves Hashem, that's with a big storm and a big commotion and a lot of fire and a lot of passion, because Nefesh Bahamas and Hashem are two separate things. So on one hand, it seems to be a disadvantage. On the other hand, the advantage is that love is with a much greater sort of force than the love of Nefesh Elokis. Nefesh Elokis love is deeper, but there's much more force in the love of the Nefesh Bahamas.
What does it say about Rabbi living in such a shows love for Hashem that was so strong?
No, so when there's a strong love, of course, there's supposed to be that fire. In other words, you can go deeper and deeper on the highest levels. So that means that Rabbi Yitzchak's Adichver's love was definitely a great tzaddik, and definitely because of the understanding of Hashem, but he brought it mainly down to the emotional level. And by, let's say, the Rebbes of Chabad, which also have that great love, yet they were all, like you saw the Rebbe Dab, and that's how all the Rebbes of Chabad were. One exception was the Alter Rebbe was different. But from the Mittel Rebbe and on, very calm. So that calmness means that there was much more intellect. The ingredient of intellect was much more dominating in their experience than the emotion.
So how do you achieve harmony?
How do you what?
Achieve harmony. And the two work together.
So the truth is that both are important. In fact, that's why we have in davening, there's a part of davening where they're singing and we're out loud, and that's the part which is more the stormy love, and that's the part of davening before Shemona Esrei. Shemona Esrei is supposed to be very quiet, and that's the reason, because that's supposed to be, relatively speaking, is that's like the love like water. So we need to have both. In fact, it's the noisy love, the commotion, the love that has a storm that's going to affect my nefesh bahamis more than the other love. It's a little bit like the Sikha, the famous Sikha of the Rebbe, that when you're learning and davening yourself, we don't find that there's a point in being very loud about it. But when you want to reach others, you have to be loud, because how else are you going to reach the others? Famous Sikha of the Rebbe of Pashas Tetzaveh. How are you going to reach others if you don't make a lot of noise? This is one of the arguments people had about Miftzayim, that, they have these tanks and they make a lot of noise and they're attracting a lot of attention. And that always was not so much of a sort of a Torah way, because Torah way is not to attract attention. Torah way is more tznius. I know sometimes when people hear the word tznius in reference to this, it sounds a little bit funny, but it is something which, tznius is not just about clothing and about the issue of men and women. Tznius means in general, things are done in a modest way, not in a loud way. Loudness usually is an indication that there's some sort of an emptiness, something is missing. Yes, it's relative, there are many levels to this, but in general, as you know, the famous quote, an empty barrel makes a lot of noise. Why? Because it's empty, then the only way that it could sort of, the only way that it could announce its existence is by making noise. But something which has content and is full with content doesn't need to make the noise to have substance. It has substance in its own right.
So why we decided still to keep this noise?
The reason why we make the noise is because we have to reach people outside. And the only way to reach people outside is because of the loudness. Just to give you an example, Rashi says the difference between the first set of the luchas and the second set of the luchas. If you might remember it from Chitas, that the first set of luchas was given with thunder and lightning and smoke and fire. There was a big commotion. What does Rashi say? What happened? It broke. The second set of luchas was given quietly, and what happened? They last until today. So Rashi says, from here we see the importance or the greatness of tznius. So Rashi is using the word tznius in reference to what? In reference to the luchas. So that's the answer. Tznius is not just, on the contrary, tznius, when you talk about clothing, men and women, is the principle is the same principle, but it's not just about that. It's in general that something which has more content and meaning and filled with content doesn't need to be loud. And the only reason why we're loud with all the Miftzayim and all that is simply because there's no way you can reach the rest of the world without being loud. So on a personal level, when I daven in a way that there's a fire burning and there's a storm going on, that'll move my nefesh bahamis more than even the deeper love, because even though it's deeper, but nevertheless, because it's so deep and it's so calm, it's not going to move the nefesh bahamis. What we want to do in davening is to move the nefesh bahamis. And that's with the stormy love. So that's what he's saying. This is the advantage of Nefesh Bahamis, that he's prone to midas, and Nefesh Bahamis is excitable. And in davening, we want to make the Nefesh Bahamis excited about Hashem.
So like you wake it up at first with like Siddhi Zimra, and you sing those, and then like
Right.
you're singing through, but then like ideally you're achieving that. Like you're overcoming that by the time you get Shemona Esrei.
Right.
It's more calm.
And then in the Shemona Esrei is the other level of love, the higher level of love.
So now I need to sing, I just gotta know what to say.
Even in the Beis Hamikdash, there were two fires burning. Both of them represent love. But one fire was a noisy fire. The other fire was a quiet fire. The fire on the Mizbeach, when fire burns wood, it makes noise. The fire in the menorah was a quiet fire. It says it also represents these two levels of love. So let's do the last few lines here on page 134, right before, at the end of Daled. Let's start with the line that reads Hahis Pilus. It's 2, 4, 5 lines from the end. Because Nefesh Bahamis is prone by nature to get excited. That's what Nefesh Bahamis is all about. It's an excitable being. That's why when you do the Psukkah de Zimra, the Chlal, and especially when you're mizbein in the brachas of Shema, where we talk about the malachim, the bitla malachim, the chayis hakedesh, how the malachim and the chayis hakedesh, how they serve Hashem, and they're, like it says in davening, with a lot of noise, there's a big commotion. That has a deeper impact in the Nefesh Bahamis. The Nefesh Bahamis who shorshim mishmorei fanim. The Nefesh Bahamis, its source is from those malachim, from those angels that we talk about in davening. They evolve from those angels. And therefore, when you read about them and you think about them and you meditate how those angels, which is the source, are all excited, when a person meditates on how the Nefesh Bahamis, its true source is really excited about Hashem, that alone makes it weaker. He steps out of his initial status where he was before, where he was totally wrapped up in Gashmis and in materialism and didn't even recognize that there's something like godliness out there. The Nasa Muksha Lases Keli. And then he becomes ready to become a Keli.
Can you summarize what we just read?
The summary of this piece, turn back the page for a second, and you see that whoever did this mimer put a little summary, but he put it at the beginning of the ois, not at the end. So in Hebrew it says, Milas Nefesh Bahamis. The advantage of the Nefesh Bahamis is that it's prone to get excited. People that are prone to get excited, for the most part, are more prone to get excited, and it would lead to good midas rather than getting excited with evil things. Through meditating in Psukkah de Zimra and Brichas Kushma, the Nefesh Bahamis gets excited, especially when it thinks about its source, where it's coming from those angels, and they're all excited about Hashem. Very often, there are people that say that one of the things that led them to tshuva, I remember a student here told the story how they were going through pictures. And they came up with a picture, and she was shocked to see somebody with a beard, and the woman was wearing a sheitel, and she asked her mother, what's this? Who is this? Oh, that's a great-grandfather. But in her, that's our great-grandfather, a beard, and what were they? What kind of creatures were they? What were they doing? And then she finds out that they were from Jews and they kept kosher and all that. And that made her look more into it. In other words, if this is my origin, if this is where I'm coming from, this is my source, I want to identify with that. Somehow it fascinated her. And that's what led to Yiddishkeit. In other words, when a person realizes this is my source, I know someone, I knew her, unfortunately she's no longer here. So when she became frum, naturally, like many other people, it was a big issue with the family. So she wrote to the Rebbe that as a result of her becoming frum, she feels she became alienated to the entire family. She alienated herself from the family. So the Rebbe said it's a little bit different than you perceive it. Actually, your family extends for over 3,000 years. From Matan Torah, everyone was learning, davening, doing mitzvahs, keeping Shabbos, keeping kosher. This has been going on for 3,000 years. That's the family. And there's a few people recently, in the recent generation or two, that they decided to alienate themselves from the family. But really, you are connecting to the family. That's really the emphasis, the other way around.
Rabbi Majeski?
Yeah.
What you're saying is that the Nefesh Habahamis gets excited during Pesukah Zimra or like other.
Generally during Pesukah Zimra, because we're meditating on the greatness of Hashem, but specifically the brachas before the Shema. Well, one of the reasons why we're talking about the angels, we're humans, not angels. So why are we talking about their avodah? And the answer is because the Nefesh Bahamis evolves from the angels. So in a sense, it's like telling the Nefesh Bahamis, you know where you come from? You know what your origin is? You think that you're a behemoth. It's not true. You're really coming from these malachim. And these malachim, they have a fire burning, and they have a passion, and they're on fire with their love for Hashem. And then the Nefesh Bahamis realizes that having love for Hashem is sort of, that's really who I really am. Not that this is something which is not me. That's the feeling initially. I'm doing something which feels awkward. It's not me. We're trying to tell Nefesh Bahamis, this is you. This is who your essence is. This is where you're coming from. Now, I think the way to define this ice, even though he doesn't, this person who wrote it doesn't put it in, but from the Maimer it appears to be this is it. That is that this Maimer is talking about the idea that saying Pesukah de Zimra, the point is to make the Nefesh Bahamis a vessel for godliness. And using the analogy of a piece of wood, a log, if you want to take wood from a log and make it into a keli, there are two steps. Step number one is to carve it out from the outside, carve it out of the log. Now I have a block of wood in my hand. Step number two is to carve it out on the inside, and now it turns into a keli. Once it's a keli, now it could start really connecting to godliness.
Is specifically Zimra the second
Pesukah de Zimra is these two things, both of them. Yeah. I just want to explain a little bit more clearly what the two things are. That remember I told you a story. I'm sure you remember. Actually, it's related to Purim because the story happened on Purim. That the Rebbe Rashab was traveling, and he was in a place which was not home, someplace else, but there was some chassidim there. And he asked the Rebbe Rashab, being that it's Purim, would he have a farbrengen? And he said, no. At home, he would always farbrengen on Purim, but I guess because he was traveling, for whatever reason, he wasn't going to farbrengen. The Frierdiker Rebbe was the principal of the yeshiva, Tem Chetvim, and he got a telegram. The telegram was somebody in the administration that wrote a report while they were away, wrote a report of how the students were doing. The report was a very positive report. And he knew that the yeshiva and the progress in the yeshiva it really affected his father to the core. And when he hears good news, it touches him to the core about the Bachram. So he went into his father and he read this. And his father was glowing from pleasure. When he saw that his father is in such a frame of mind, he said, maybe you will farbrengen. And he said, okay, we'll have a farbrengen. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said was a very extraordinary farbrengen. The Rebbe Rashab said a lot of l'chaim, told everybody else to say l'chaim. And by that farbrengen, that's when the Rebbe Rashab said those words, who wants to go on my wagon? And then he described his wagon. He said the wagon is decorated with the deep philosophical concepts of Chassidus, and it's saturated with the sweat and tears of avodah of Chassidus. You know, the Chassidus is two things. One thing is learning and understanding deep concepts of godliness. And the other thing is working on ourselves, self-refinement, to become a more refined person. So he said it's decorated with the philosophical concepts, that's the beauty, but it also is saturated with the tears and sweat of avodah, working hard on self-refinement. One of the chassidim started to cry and said, Rabbi, where are the steps to your wagon? So the Rashab said, you're right, we need steps. And then he said there are 4 steps to the wagon. 2 steps to get off the ground, and the other 2 steps are to get into the wagon. In other words, I can't get into the wagon unless I take my feet off the ground. Figuratively speaking, what does that mean? I can't really connect to Hashem unless I let go of my investment where I am in the physical materialistic world. We're not talking about letting go of not eating and drinking and sleeping. That's not our way. But we're talking about the investment, the passion. If a person is extremely passionate about Gashmis and about materialism, they won't be able to feel love and passion for Hashem because they're so connected here, they can't be connected there. So they have to first be ready to let go. It's interesting, I'm sure you learn in the halacha, the laws of Shabbos. One of the conditions that when it comes to Shabbos that you're not allowed to carry is there has to be an akira and a hanacha. Anyone know what those terms mean? Akira and hanacha means that if I take something out of the private domain on Shabbos and I carry it out, it's only a malacha if I put it down somewhere. If I never put it down, it's not a malacha. Also, if I put it down, but I never took it out from the private domain, it's also not a malacha. Which means the malacha requires two things. If you want to transfer something from the private domain to the public domain, there has to be one act which is uprooting it from the private domain, and another act which is putting it down in the public domain, or reverse. But if I didn't uproot it from the first place, or I didn't put it down in the second place, it was never a real transition here. So that means that in order for something to be transferred to a new sort of territory, it has to be uprooted from the previous territory. If not, it's not considered that it really, like for example, imagine, I'll get to you in a second, imagine you have like a scroll, like a Megillah, and you're in your Rishus HaYachid, you're holding it, and the other part unrolls into the Rishus HaRabbim and falls on the floor. It's not a malacha, because I'm still holding this part over here. So as long as it didn't leave here, it can be considered that it arrived there. There was a bacher, a friend of mine, who was, well, we'll talk about it tomorrow more. Anyway, many moons ago, 1967, I went on Shlichus to Australia. And it was at Chov Daled Adar Rishon. And then we arrived there this 26th of Adar Rishon. And today's day, the 25th of Adar Rishon, did not exist. Because when you go from America to Australia, we left on a Monday, we came on a Wednesday, and there was no Tuesday. That's what happens when you pass the date line. So there was another bacher that he had a birthday right on the day that didn't exist. So he said, Rebbe, what can I do about my birthday? So the Rebbe said, as long as the plane didn't arrive in its destination, go by the place where you're coming from. In other words, you left New York, it was Monday. Now, while you're flying, it's already Tuesday. You go by that it's still, for you, it's still Tuesday, because as long as you didn't arrive in Australia, you're still going by where you came from. So therefore, there has to be these two stages. One is stepping out of where I was before, and the second one is to step into the new place. Didn't forget about you, Amy. I'll get to you in a second. Like when it says, when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, it also says these were the two stages. The first stage was going out of Mitzrayim. Number one, just let go of Mitzrayim. The second stage is stand by Har Sinai and connect to Hashem. And in between, there was a period of 49 days. So when it says here that you have to carve out and make it into a keli, which means the Nefesh Bahamis is carve out what? It's so immersed in physical and material, it doesn't even know about spirituality. It doesn't even exist in its world. So first you have to sort of disconnect the Nefesh Bahamis from that total, complete immersion in the Gashmizdika world, and then it can become a vessel to have Ruchnius. Yes, Amy?
No, I just wanted to time so that way I can write all that down.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I guess that's what the Psukkah Zimmer is all about. Talking to my Nefesh Bahamis, making the Nefesh Bahamis aware of godliness, getting him excited. We want to move him to be moved, and to realize that there's something higher than the world that I'm living in.
So Rabbi Majeski,
Yeah.
where are the distracting thoughts coming from? Like if our Nefesh Bahamis is getting excited and becoming on fire and stuff, where is that battle happening whenever it's the distracting thoughts? Is it not coming from the same place, or it's just part of the process, or?
Yeah, it's coming from the same place, but the Nefesh Bahamis is as long as it's not transformed 100%, it'll still have those aspects to it which try to disturb us and distract us from learning and davening. Yeah, it's still the Nefesh Bahamis. Won't give up its title so quickly. Yeah, Charizal.
So is it that the Pesukei Zimra is the first half of this, the leaving Mitzrayim, and then the Birkas Krishma are us connecting to God, in
Krishma, no, Birkas Krishma, Pesukei Zimra fall into one category. Then Krishma, Shmona Esrei is the next step.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are if we're comparing to the wagon.
Right.
Then the Pesukei Zimra are the first two steps.
Right.
Okay.
Could you please repeat what you said about how the thing of you're not there until you land, that kind of.
But I was saying that you haven't really left the previous place until you land in the new place. But you also can't land in the new place if I haven't left the previous place. It works both ways. It's not considered leaving the first place until you land in a new place. And I can't land in a new place. I can't really arrive there unless I left completely the first place. What's the halacha if you go from America to Israel for Yom Tov? You keep 2 days or 1 day?
1 day. Well, Chabad is 1 day.
Okay, there are reasons why there's a custom, but the reason, generally speaking, if you go for a year or more, of course you keep 1 day, like everybody has to sell. But if you're going there temporarily, you keep 2 days. Why? Because you didn't really leave America, even though physically, technically, your feet are in Eretz Yisrael, but you still belong to where you came from because you're not planning to leave. So let's do Dalet now. So these are the last words in Dalet, the last words of that previous ayah. Look at the last words. When the Nefesh Bahamis understands and fails how its source is Batul Hashem, Nechlash, it becomes weaker. As a result of that, it goes out of that original status where it was before. Where was it before? Totally immersed in Gashmis and materialism. Now it becomes ready to become a Keli for godliness. The Shulchan of Pesukei Zimra, Birchas Krishma. This explains why Pesukei Zimra and the Brachas of Shema compared to the table. What this means is that Aveda Pesukei Zimra Birchas Krishma, Ikar Aveda, the main Aveda is Bechakikas HaNefesh, to carve out what we said before in the Nefesh Bahamis, Lases Kli, to make it into a vessel. And the vessel is the Beis Chakikas, the two carvings that we mentioned before. Chakikam and Bechutz, one carving is from the outside, Lafrida Mirah, one is from the outside to cut it away from how it's immersed in negativity, and then to make it carved out from inside, and by doing that, now it's becoming a keli for godliness. This is by getting rid of the tzir, the form of the Nefesh Bahamis. So here he introduces another thing. All along you hear the word Yetzer Hara and you hear the word Nefesh Bahamis. People who don't study Chassidus don't know the Nefesh Bahamis, they just know Yetzer Hara. When you study Chassidus, you know the Nefesh Bahamis. So where did the Yetzer Hara go? Is he also there? Is that a separate entity? Is it the same thing? What is the Yetzer Hara in reference to the Nefesh Bahamis?
We
What
got
is-
rid of him by studying Chassidus. So
What?
we don't have him anymore because we got rid of him by
Yeah.
studying Chassidus.
Yeah, he left and now he's somewhere else.
Yeah. No, so the word Yetzer, Yud Tzadik Reish, if you rearrange the letters, it also spells the word Tzir. Tzir means form. What he's going to explain is that the Nefesh Bahamis, in essence, is not evil. Nefesh Bahamis would be defined as a force of desire. Just, I want. I want. What do I want? Whatever's going to give me pleasure, I want. Could be food, could be clothing, could be entertainment, whatever it is. That's the Nefesh Bahamis. Just once. Tzir Ra, what?
Oh, sorry, you said seer is
Tzir means form.
form.
You can take that desire and it can be formed in a negative way. In other words, when a person, for example, has a desire and a burning desire and a fire to do a real terrible Aveira, there's two parts to it. One is the desire, and the other is the desire to do the Aveira. So what he's saying is the desire itself is, in a sense, parav. It's just a wanting power, a very strong force. And that force, it's applied to something that's evil, then it becomes Yetzer Hara. So the Nefesh Bahamis is just the want. The Yetzer Hara is when that want takes on an evil form. So even a person that has a strong desire to do something negative, you can say to that person, there's a part of what you have you can hold on to, and there's a part of what you have that you have to get rid of. The fact that this desire isn't something negative, the negative part you have to get rid of. The desire, the passion, the fire, hold on to that and actually use that fire, that passion in a good way.
Can we accomplish that through davening?
And that's one of the things we accomplish in davening. Like very often we find people that are very passionate about something. That's their hobby, they're passionate about it. Then when they become frum, they find out that what they're passionate about is not a kosher thing. But they have this passion. And then they learn and they find a way that they can take that same passion. Let's say, for example, someone who has leadership qualities, and he was leading a group of people, but leading them in a negative way, into a negative place. He was very influential, charismatic, he had an impact on people, he was very articulate, and had a lot of hashpah on people to go in a certain direction, where that direction was a negative direction. So the fact that it's a negative direction that you have to get rid of, but the passion that he has to be a leader, the passion that he has to teach, the passion that he has to inspire others, that should stay. But now we can use that, all those same tools, but in a positive way. That part is Nefesh Bahamis. The fact that it went to something really evil, that's the Yetzer Hara, the Tzir Hara. It's like having a piece of dough. The dough could be formed any way. But once you form it this way and you bake it, now it looks like a cookie, like an elephant. But if you bake it differently, it looks like something else. So the Nefesh Bahamis and the Yetzer, these are the two things. So the word for the Yetzer Hara is Tzir Hara. Is it underlined in your copy? No.
Wait, seer means passion,
Tzir means form.
form.
Tzura means form.
It's seer.
In other words, take the word Yetzer Hara and translate it as a bad form, evil form. Taking a raw piece of material and forming it in an evil way. The raw material is the Nefesh Bahamis' desire, the power, the force, having a desire in a forceful way. Yep.
So could you say that could you say that the Nefesh Bahamis is like the vessel for that, like that seer, that form, that force that can be, that's, you said it's like part, so it could be Yetzer Hara or Yetzer Tov, but
Yep.
it becomes Yetzer Hara, it's housed in the Nefesh Bahamis, but the Nefesh Elokis is is going to hold the form, it's like a vessel for the form of the Yetzer
Right.
Tov.
And eventually try to turn it around that same power that Nefesh Habahamis has should go to Kedusha.
So the Nefesh HaBahamis has the capacity to also hold Yetzer Tov.
Yep.
And it can double.
Right. So the passion will be there, the desire will be there, the fire will be there, but it'll go in a good direction.
Is that like a good way to think about the Nefesh HaBahamis and Nefesh HaLakis as like a vessel of some sort for the desire that goes inside of it, or is it not really like that? It's not really a relationship.
You're saying a vessel and the Yitzhar is in it?
Right, like if everything's like light and vessels, like is the Nefesh HaBahamis the vessel for the light of the Yetzer Hara, and the Nefesh HaLakis is the vessel for the light to get to go?
Somehow I'm not thinking of it as a vessel, I'm trying to think of a different analogy
Right.
that maybe would make it more clear, not as a vessel, but more like,
What's the relationship, like how do they fit together?
Well, I think it makes sense of how you said about it's like dough, and that when it's Yitzhahara, just dough that's shaped into a bad way versus.
right, that's why I use that example. It's something which has to be shaped a certain way. Something which is shapeless, and you can shape it in a certain way. And then it becomes that way or a different way.
Right, so the shaping is the hara or the toe part.
Right.
The dough is the yetzer.
Is Nefesh Habahamis part.
The dough is the Nefesh HaBahamis.
Right,
Okay.
right.
But where does the Nefesh HaLakis come? Like where is that?
Nefesh Habahamis is something which is pure godly. It doesn't go either way. That's only godliness.
Untouchable dough.
Yeah. No, that's very fully baked cake. Yeah.
What if you feel like you've already baked the cake,
Eat it.
but then how do you reform it?
What?
How do you reform it? No, it makes it like a big difference. Like, what happens if a person genuinely feels that their own?
Doesn't matter. It's not. Doesn't have to be that way, and I can turn it around.
It's baked.
So Begashmis, if it's baked, it's baked. But Baruchni is sweet. It's flexible.
Maybe it's like chocolate, you can just like melt it back down. And then reshape it.
What do they call it? The Play-Doh that kids play with?
Yeah.
Play-Doh.
Right.
You form it into who knows what, and then you just mish it all together again, and you can make a new form. That's a better mushroom. Okay, so the HR is like a Play-Doh. Fine.
Rabbi Majeski since Rabbi Parker was not here.
Mrs. Nam is going to continue with Purim, right? Okay, that's the Harab, everybody.
Thank you, Majeski. Really cool. Bring this timer a lot.
I hope you have Bahamas will also enjoy it.
What did you say?
I hope you have Bahamas will also enjoy
I think she's enjoying it also.
Enjoy what?
The mimer. Movie. Clear. Movie.